Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's panel, Pride at Work, How to Improve Inclusivity in the Workplace. My name's Harris and I'll be your moderator for today's panel. A quick introduction to myself. I'm the Diversity Co-Chair for Hired and help lead our customer success teams here in the UK. For those not familiar with Hired, we're the largest AI-driven marketplace that matches ambitious tech and sales talent with the world's most innovative companies, such as Checkout.com and Skyscanner. As a business, we're committed to building equity in the hiring process through a more representative talent pool using bias reduction features, customized assessments, and salary bias alerts to help remove unconscious bias when hiring. Before we get started, some housekeeping. The panel's going to run for about 45 minutes, after which we'll try and leave 15 minutes of questions and answers. So if you've got any questions throughout, please use the chat and we'll do our very best to get to them all. Otherwise, we'll try and follow up with you after the event. We also want to ensure that today's event is a safe space and is inclusive for everyone. So we will be monitoring the chat, so for any inappropriate behavior, it will be handled accordingly. Today's session is also being recorded and it will be available on LinkedIn after the event. As we get started, I thought it would be important just to define the terms. Lgbtqia+ stands for lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. And the plus is there to cover more subsects of the community, like pansexual and genderqueer. So how did we get here and what's the history of Pride Month? Pride Month is celebrated each year in June to honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprising. This was the tipping point of the gay liberation movement in the United States after police raided one of the city's most popular gay clubs. A year later, marches were organized to mark the anniversary and an annual tradition was born across the globe. As the years have gone on, Pride Month has evolved to celebrate the entire Lgbtqia+ community and symbolizes even more for so many people. It can act as a great catalyst in bringing important conversations like this into the world. But despite all the progress we've made, there's still a lot more we can be doing. In the UK, 1 in 5 Lgbtq+ employees still don't feel comfortable about being open about their identity at work. And in the United States, nearly 50% are still in the closet at work. In a 2021 report published by Hired on wage inequality, on data collected by around 250,000 job seekers, it was found that there is a wage gap in the UK of 2.4 for the Lgbtq+ community, whereas there is no wage gap in the US. Throughout today's panel, we'll be discussing and hopefully leaving you with three main key takeaways. Firstly, how you can set up and run an internal Lgbtq+ community or staff network, how you can identify some of the barriers to having a truly inclusive workplace, and some tangible tips you can take into your workplace to make them more inclusive. So with that, I'd love to hand it off to the panelists to introduce themselves. Perhaps Jenna, you can get us started.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Howieson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the DEI, so Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Lead at Skyscanner, and I also founded and run the Pride Network at Skyscanner as well. I'll hand over to Tom.
Thanks, Jenna. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am Tom Pattison, pronouns he, him, and I'm Checkout.com's Senior Employer Brand Specialist. So it's the role of me and my team to amplify all the brilliant things that are going on within Checkout.com to an external audience to kind of open the door, I guess, to show what's going on within the company. And I also help run our Pride community at Checkout, which is an internal group for members of the LGBTQIA+ community and allies to connect and support each other. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here today to talk about such an important topic. And I'll pass over to Adel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adel. I run the sales engineering team here at Checkout. I've been with Checkout for about 2 years. My role kind of goes around managing all the pre-sales and bid management for our strategic merchants.
Amazing, thanks so much. Yeah, really excited for today's panel and thank you all for joining us today. So Tom, I'd love to start with you. What does an inclusive workplace look like to you?
Sure, yeah, I think that's a great question to start. I guess I would say for me, an inclusive workplace would be somewhere where everybody feels comfortable being themselves without worry of being treated differently. I would say it definitely goes beyond just an environment of tolerance where people's differences are just, tolerated, but they're actually valued, celebrated, and encouraged. I would say it's quite hard to achieve. I mean, businesses are very, very complex, no matter how big or small. So for a workplace to be truly inclusive, I would say it should be that kind of inclusion and comfort should be felt by everybody. I will resist for now going on to talking a little bit about how that could be achieved. I think we'll cover that later on. But yeah, there's some starter thoughts.
Amazing. And Jenna, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. I think very similar to Tom, so completely agree with all of that. I think for me, it goes beyond just acceptance to that place of active celebration and a sense of belonging as well. So we talk about inclusion a lot, but we also talk about belonging. And I think that's that deeper sense, like being invited to the table is great, but being listened to, amplified and supported is really what brings that true sense of belonging. And I think inclusion requires an active allyship and taking active and tangible steps to build that sense of belonging. It doesn't just happen by default. And like, as Tom said, it's not always easy to achieve. So it really takes meaningful action to get there.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. And yeah, Adel, your thoughts?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think for me, an inclusive workplace is a place where you basically can be yourself, you're open, you're not afraid to say what you think, and your voice is heard, and your opinion matters. That is what I would consider an inclusive workplace, where we have lots of different backgrounds, lots of cultures, and it becomes a melting pot to kind of build something together and learn to coexist and work with each other.
Yeah, all really important points. I really like the differentiation around sort of acceptance and tolerance is important, but I think taking that next step to really embracing, valuing, and celebrating different people and cultures is really important. So I guess on that note, perhaps we can start with you this time, Adel. What steps can people take to make the workplace more inclusive?
I think it is important to have an open mind, to be open-minded and come with no prejudice. Basically, prejudice kind of can cause to think about things that you have as in the back of your mind about what other people are from other cultures, but also, let's say, when they are different from you are. And kind of one of the things that I said earlier is one of the things that is important is being able to speak your mind, where if you see something that does not fit with your ideals or with the way that you think, and you think that you're being either discriminated or looked at differently, speak up your mind, be open, because if you don't say, no one is going to say it for you, and that is the important thing here. Don't be afraid, and that starts with us as the community members to say when we feel that we are not being treated in the right way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think visibility, it's such an important topic, and I think, we'll get to that later on. But Tom, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adel's spoken very well about the kind of what individuals can do within an organization. I think thinking a little broader at a company level, actually setting the standard and being really bold and transparent about what you believe and what you will and won't stand for, I guess, can go a really long way in making sure that everybody feels secure in the knowledge that there will be repercussions for those that kind of impede on that inclusivity at work. We at Checkout kind of have a building belonging policy, a code of conduct, which is publicly available, referenced a lot, so people can really go to it to make sure that they know the support and protection, I guess, that the business will provide for them.
That's really important. I really like that. As a business, you've got policies and codes of conduct in place. I think a lot of time, whilst people will know what is right and wrong, I think it's important for a business to sort of say, this is what we believe in, and these are our policies. Jenna, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of what creates that inclusive environment is education. So starting, like Adel said, with that open mind and being willing to learn, but providing that education. And sometimes that's formal education by way of, like online courses and e-learns and seminars and things that people can come along to and learn. And sometimes education is as simple as having a conversation. So starting a conversation on a topic that maybe hasn't been discussed or people are unsure of, and creating a safe space where everyone can learn. So there's no judgment if someone uses the wrong terminology. Everyone is there with the intent to learn. And it's a safe space to ask questions as well. Because the only way to make progress and to really create that inclusive space is through education, in my opinion. So yeah, for sure, we try and do that in that formal sense and also that informal sense of, you know, sharing when it's an awareness day, for example, International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, you know, sharing a little bit of stats around the experiences of people and also what that means. Or we've got Bi Visibility Day, Lesbian Visibility Day. All these different days are really great opportunities in the calendar throughout the year to just drip feed little bits of education on different people's experiences and then what everyone can do to be more inclusive of different people and their identities.
Yeah, that's sorry, Tom. Were you going to say?
I was going to say I totally agree with Jenna, and from our experience, if you can get a variety of voices involved with those activities as well, so pushing, I guess, outside of the people team, thinking about senior leadership as well, and whether there are opportunities for them to get involved and show their support, I think can carry massive weight in creating that sense of inclusion across the entire business. I think sometimes we can get trapped in, as Jenna said, making sure people are saying the right thing. It can become a bit corporate and a bit trite, I guess, but allowing for a bit more freedom and getting a bit more creative, whether it be through kind of videos, photos, brief testimonials, really can go a long way, I would say.
Yeah, something that we've found really impactful for creating that safe space to ask questions is even giving the ability to ask anonymous questions. So within that environment where you're maybe teaching about, I don't know, the LGBT acronym, and people are like, you know, the word queer is often something that people don't feel super comfortable using, or they're not sure, is that an appropriate term or not? Having the ability to ask a question without fear of being judged for not knowing the answer creates that learning moment where you can have a conversation around it and then build from there. So definitely that's worked for us really well within Skyscanner as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a cool initiative, being able to ask anonymous questions. I agree. I think, you know, for a lot of people, you know, especially people who, you know, want to be better allies, they might be afraid of saying the wrong thing and, you know, doing more harm than good. So no, that's great. And I guess moving on to the next question, again, perhaps we can start with you this time, Jenna. How important do you think visibility is at work when it comes to the LGBTQIA+ community?
I could talk for hours on the importance of representation and visibility. This is why I feel so passionate about this. And I think that visibility and representation is so important because you can't be what you can't see. And so the more diverse our workforces are, and particularly in those leadership positions, and the more that others are empowered to know what is possible. And that's why, like, it's amazing to celebrate, you know, change makers and people breaking those ceilings. But the more we can sort of celebrate role models and create that visibility, the greater that environment. Of course, we would never want to push anybody to a position where they felt like they had to be visible if they would rather not. So that's absolutely not a line to cross. But when we've got people that are out and proud and willing to share their story, amplifying those stories really creates a safe space for other people to feel like they can, you know, come out and share their story as well. And when you've got an environment where people feel like they can be out and proud in the workplace, it's really just better for everybody. I guess a great way to spotlight and create that visibility, if you don't have staff that are willing to do it first, is highlighting and spotlighting, you know, maybe public figures or celebrities or other people who are out and proud and doing that great work. For example, yesterday was International Women in Engineering Day. So we spotlighted a couple of LGBTQ+ women who were doing great things in the tech space, you know, out in the world from different parts of the world. So that's a great way to spotlight and create that visibility, even if you don't have staff who are comfortable yet being those role models within your own workplace.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I love what you said at the beginning, you can't be what you can't see. I've written that down. I think that's something I'm using for a long time.
I would totally agree with Jenna as well. Like, yeah, if people feel safe and confident and comfortable making themselves visible at work, it can have massive benefits. I mean, just speaking from personal experience, especially entering work for the first time, it was hugely important for me seeing those role models actually within the business, making me feel comfortable. It was almost like you have to come out again when you join a new workplace, and seeing it and going, oh, okay, well, that person's, you know, doing incredibly well within the business. It's definitely, you know, something that is fine, encouraged. And that does happen again every time you change work, or at least it has been for me. You have to look out for those and think again, what is the lay of the land here? And those role models are massively important in that, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that, you know, you almost have to come out again at work. And I think for a lot of people, especially allies, it's not something we would ever think of or really understand or appreciate. So that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Adel, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for me, I think that visibility kind of creates this discourse that people don't want to have, and when you basically are visible and you are who you are and you show that you are actually successful being the person who you are and you are true to yourself, this kind of brings people together and it creates an interest between people to learn about each other and understand the differences in the lifestyles and also the difficulties. And at that point, one of the things that here are on the personal level for me is the fact that visibility was never an option where I grew up. So now, in my professional life, it is important for me because it sets a role model and it sets an example for people to follow in the footsteps and not to be afraid of being who they are and being visible. Because I think that people forget at some point is that at the end of the day, we are all human and we are all worthy of the exact same level. And for that, we should be exactly who we are and not be afraid of being who we are.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree that. And I think, again, an interesting point you mentioned, for you growing up, visibility wasn't an option. So I think, for a lot of people, they're coming from different backgrounds. We don't know what their family environment was, which cultures they come from. Having that visibility and representation in the workplace can be, very impactful, even if those people don't feel comfortable coming out in the workplace as well. But yeah, I guess before we move on to the next question, is there anything else anyone wanted to mention? Great. So yeah, Tom, perhaps we can start with you this time. I guess on that note, inversely, what are some mistakes you think companies make that set inclusion back at work?
Mistakes. I think Jenna already talked about training a little bit, and I would definitely say a mistake that people make, or some companies, that they have to take it all on their own, basically, and can't ask for support or help. And there's actually a massive amount of knowledge out there. And I think as a community within this space, it's a very giving community. It promotes that sharing and it wants to improve inclusivity in all workplaces. So I think going out and looking online, connecting with some amazing partners in the space, I think, to get that external expertise when it comes to really important things like training, making sure that workplaces are set up for people of all abilities, things like that. I think, yeah, companies shouldn't think that they have to take that all on their own. They can certainly ask for help, and there is a wealth of information out there to lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting point. I think, when it comes to inclusion, we're all in this together. It's not about one company saying we're better at diversity than other people. And I think what I'm really proud of, I guess, looking at the the four of us here today, we're all from different companies, and I think that's it. It's we're all here together, bring different perspectives, really on that one topic. It's not just about our own companies, but it's about how we can make the workplace more inclusive. But yeah, Jenna, I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the mistakes that perhaps you've seen or that you think can set inclusion back.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely echo that point around sort of community. I think when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and LGBT inclusion, this isn't something that someone is going to do better than someone else. This is we're all aiming for the same goal. So while in business there can be that competitive nature between, different businesses, this is not something that anybody should be competing in to try and do the best. The more we all work together, the greater the outcome is for absolutely everybody. So absolutely would echo that. And I think the other thing is, there's no version of this that is done or complete or perfect, because we live in this world that is forever evolving. And so even us sitting on the call, we've got our expertise and our knowledge and our experience, but we are also still learning. I know myself, I'm learning every single day, and the world is always evolving. There's new language, there's new terminology, there's new, rules and laws and policies coming into place. So this is never going to be a done or complete thing. This is just a journey that we're on, and always trying to do the best version of what we can do at that time. And so I think that that's just always something to bear in mind as well.
Absolutely. I think that's the point. I think a lot of the time, again, with that business mindset, it is about, getting up to 100% or having it perfect. But I think, it's important to remind ourselves that, this is a journey. And I think, as you mentioned, we live in a society that is changing every single day. I don't think any of us would have thought we'd be where we are a couple of years ago. But yeah, that's a great example. And then, yeah, Adel, keen to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that, from being at different companies and seeing what people or, how people were hiring before, I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen is what we call sympathy hires, where you want to allocate certain quota for different backgrounds, weaker backgrounds, things like that. It doesn't really work because it doesn't serve the matter. And that becomes like, it may be well-intended, yes, but it actually doesn't really help towards diversity. It helps towards image and visibility outside, but it doesn't really help you inside the company. So this is one of the things that I've seen kind of throughout my career, where I see companies just basically hiring just for the sake of the statistics, not because they actually want to be diverse and inclusive.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think, I've seen it a few times in my career, and ultimately, the person that's been hired is in a really unfortunate position as well, because the way they're perceived at work, the way they get treated is often as that sympathy hire, and nobody wins except, as you mentioned, perhaps the careers page looks a bit nicer, but you're not actually doing anything to really make any impact in the business. And I guess on that note, Jenna, I'd love to start with you this time. What do you think of businesses' involvement in Pride Month as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely builds exactly onto what Adel's just said, because I think that for us, especially at Skyscanner, it's been about getting involved in Pride, or looking at inclusion and diversity internally first, and doing that groundwork and doing the impactful right thing first before telling the world about it. Because I think that businesses are definitely at risk of panicking when June 1st hits and they go, oh, it's Pride Month, let's change our logos to a rainbow and it'll be okay. But I think that any LGBTQ plus person can see right through it when it's not done with the correct intent. And so I think there's so much power in businesses getting involved in Pride Month. It can make a difference to staff. It can make such a difference to customers. And it's great for overall business image, but only if it's done in the right ways with the right impact. So, for the right reasons, because it's ingrained in your company culture that it's something you truly stand for. It's something that you work on 365 days a year and not just for the month of June. And it's also getting involved in a way that is going to actively support and uplift the LGBTQ plus community, and not in a way that's going to make you look great as a business and, bring in a bit of extra profit. It's going to, be amplifying a range of voices, or amplifying a charity or a cause, or, if you are a business that is going to, sell a product, are those profits going to the right place? Are they going back into the community to support the right thing? So I absolutely think that there is a time and place for businesses to be involved, as long as it's done with the right intent and has the right impact. And definitely where LGBT staff from that business have been involved in the campaign, you can see, night and day between those and, something that's been like a panic decision with nobody consulted the day before it went out. So definitely for me, it's a truly impactful and positive thing to do, as long as the right people are involved and it's done for the right reasons.
And I'd say the community is so on this as well. Like, the clapback seems to get bigger every year with members on social media. I mean, there's some amazing TikToks of really going in and dissecting exactly what is wrong with certain businesses' Pride activation. So businesses should be scared in the right way, basically. I think year on year, we aren't standing for that kind of tokenism, I guess, in the same way. So definitely everything that gets put out in the world should be thought through, and hopefully, as this continues year on year, and I'm always very proud when it happens, hopefully brands will continue to work in the right way in this space.
Absolutely, I think that's so important. I think, you both mentioned, I think first, I love that it's that internal first focus before you go out to the world and talk about how amazing you are as a business. What are you doing in your own home first? How are you supporting your community? Are you making it inclusive workplace so that when you go out to market to bring in more people from the LGBTQ plus community, they feel welcome, they're going to stay at your organization, or are they just going to leave? And I think there is just so much more accountability now, where the community is going to call it out. And I think that's a really positive thing, because it's going to call out that tokenism. And for businesses that are doing the right things, it's going to help them highlight more, and hopefully as a whole community, it will help us to progress. But Adel, yeah, would love to get your thoughts as well.
I think kind of echoing what both Jenna and Tom said is that the fact that it should be sincerely done there. And, one of the things that me as a person, I don't participate in the gay pride, for example, because I think it's too commercial and it's just geared towards making money off the back of the LGBTQ community nowadays, and does not serve the actual purpose that it was introduced for. So kind of agree with what it said. If it's done sincerely and for the right reasons, yes, that is welcome. But if it's not, then why bother? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's it. It's, there is a lot of people, it is how can we take this opportunity to make a bit more money? And unfortunately, it is the world we live in. But I think, it's important to continue having these conversations and calling out where we see that. And, I think it's great that you mentioned, that you choose not to participate in the Pride March and why you don't feel comfortable doing that. So thanks for sharing that as well. And I guess on that note, perhaps starting with you again this time, Adel, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges in improving inclusivity at work?
I think if we take a look, for example, at any high growth company, the growth of the company and the speed of the growth of the company, where everyone needs to hire, everyone needs to be helping to build an organization, kind of doesn't give you the leeway to start nitpicking between the candidates, and you just want to hire quicker and quicker, and you think less about diversity, you think more about, okay, how can I scale my team much quicker? So that is one of the things that is a challenge when talking about improving inclusivity in the company. The second thing that is also a direct result of this is the fact that we as people inside the community, but also outside the community, we tend to have the professional circles that look like us. People socialize with people who are like-minded and are the same. So when I refer people that I want to work with, I think less about the diversity and inclusivity. I think about, okay, I know this person and they can do the job, so they can deliver. So that is where I see at least one of the biggest challenges when talking about high growth companies.
Yeah, I think it's a huge challenge. I work with lots of internal talent teams, lots of scale ups going from we need to hire 1,000 people this year, and it's a delicate balance. I don't think anyone has the answer, but I think it's important to call it out that at times there can be that trade-off that companies make, even whether it's unintentionally. So the more we talk about it, the more talent acquisition teams can be conscious of it, and it's something, if it's on the agenda for every month, then it's something that is being addressed. And yeah, Jenna, keen to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I would agree with everything Adel said, and I think also it's time, because there are, for me anyway, like a million things that you want to do, and there's so much scope and potential, and it's just about finding that time to what can you do that has the biggest impact. With the time that we've got, there are only 24 hours in a day, and there's so much that you want to get involved in. So for me, it's always just about that prioritizing of what's going to have the biggest impact first, and where can we, make those biggest strides? Because like you said at the beginning, it's an ongoing journey. It's never done. And so constantly just looking at where we can have the most impact with the sort of time and capacity that we've got, because a lot of the time you'll have a couple of people within the organization who are maybe focused on this, and everybody cares about it and everybody wants to do the right thing. So just trying to get that trickled through the whole business so that everybody can be adding it to their sort of day-to-day thinking, rather than it being down to a couple of people in the organization to try and drive things forward. So definitely that time, and then also sharing the load and having it ingrained through every team and every office and every squad in the business, rather than it being that sort of small cohort of people trying to push it through 1,000 people. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I know Tom, Jenna, Adel, you're all leading the Pride communities at your work, and I think a lot of the time, the work might fall on your shoulders to do everything. But I think it's important you mentioned, it's for everyone to do it. Yes, you run these communities, and you're sort of helping to lead the strategy, but it requires everyone to work together in order to make that real change. Yeah, Tom, can you take your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that came to my mind, I think there's kind of an internal angle to what Adel was saying, you know, looking out who you're bringing in, you might default to who you connect with, who you look like, who you see yourself in. And I think that can also be true of who you champion internally, you know, who you want to mentor, who you put forward for promotions, etc. So trying to acknowledge that and tackle it internally, I think, is very important. We have had success. Centralized mentorship programs can be a good way to do this, to make sure that kind of strong mentorship is available to everybody. We trialed this in our women's community earlier in this year and had really positive feedback and results. So hopefully we'll be rolling that out across other areas of the business.
That's amazing. Yeah, we would love to, you know, perhaps something for another time, but would love to learn more about the centralized mentorship program. I agree with you. You know, there is so much unconscious bias that we all have as humans, and it is, I like you, you like me. You know, I'm going to take this person under my wing. But again, I think that's a really interesting approach to sort of centralize that mentorship piece. And I guess on that, on a similar topic, perhaps start with you this time, Tom. What role do you think allyship can play in improving inclusivity?
Great question. I think it has, when we've already talked about it a little bit anecdotally in some of the other questions, but I think it has an absolutely massive role to play. We, I guess, as members of certain communities, can't be in every conversation, in every meeting. So having those voices that we can rely on for us in those spaces that we aren't in is invaluable. I think also actually declaring yourself as an ally vocally and in public also can go a huge way. It might feel stupid, it might feel unnecessary in 2021, but I think absolutely still has a huge role to play. So yeah, those are two things that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point around, you know, being vocal about being an ally. You know, we talked about visibility and the importance for people within the community, but I think as equally it's important for allies to be visible as well and sort of declare that allyship. Yeah, Adel, keen to get your thoughts.
Sure. I think that, you know, allyship is important because what it symbolizes, what it brings is the fact that we actually stand together, but also stand up for each other. That kind of goes back to the vocalizing that you are an ally. It echoes the sentiments and it amplifies the voices of the teams. Given that if we take the community here, in most cases, the community itself is a minority within a company. So allyship is extra important in order to amplify that voice and bring, you know, the important topics for the community out in public in the company and bring things to the agendas of people, whether that's professional or political or on the how you call it, community level in terms of what we want to discuss and to bring a change for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, I completely agree that, you know, these communities are the minority, the allies represent that majority, and, you know, change is going to happen when everyone is involved. So, you know, having that majority on board is really important. And Jenna,
yeah, I think for me, when we talk about allyship, the message I always also try and echo is that we talk about the LGBT community and allies as if it's two separate groups of people. And for me, it's super important that people who identify as LGBTQ+ are also allies for each other. So myself as a cisgendered queer woman, I'm a trans ally. And so I think we also need to, as a community, be doing more to speak up for each other within that space, as well as empowering people who are not part of the community to be allies for LGBTQ+ people as well. So I think it's important to distinguish that it's not two separate groups, but that absolutely everybody, regardless of how you identify, should feel empowered to be an ally. And for me, that's being visible, which has already been said, being supportive and amplifying voices, and also being educated. So taking some time out to learn about topics that you're maybe not so familiar with, whether they impact you or not. You know, TED Talks are a great space. Google is a marvelous resource. Podcasts, books, no matter, like, however you prefer to take in that information, being an active ally is seeking out that information in your own time so that someone from that marginalized group doesn't have to do that work of educating you. And it means you're less likely to, you know, perhaps commit a microaggression that you might not be aware of as well. So definitely taking those active steps to educate yourself and be aware of how you can be the best ally that you can be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess on that note around, there's these resources, education tips, things like that. Would love to understand, I guess within your respective companies, what have you got planned for Pride Month this year? Perhaps we can start with you, Jenna.
Yep. So this month we've been focused really a lot internally all through the month of June around both educating and celebrating. So it's kind of been that 50-50 split. We want to educate on the experiences of LGBTQ plus people, whether it's in the workplace or in the wider world. And also from a Skyscanner perspective, what does that mean if you're an LGBTQ plus traveler? So love to talk about that intersective travel as well. And then also celebrating. So celebrating how far we've come since those, Stonewall riots in 1969, but also recognizing that there is still a way to go. So definitely striking that balance. So we've spoken a lot about microaggressions, sharing some microaggressions that can happen either in the workplace or just day to day for LGBTQ plus people. And then for the last week, we've been doing that celebrate piece. So we've been highlighting, spotlighting some different change makers in the tech community and also in the travel space, and the wonderful work that these people are doing to make strides for LGBTQ plus inclusion. So really it's been a lot of internal education and conversations. But for us, Pride and LGBT inclusion is all year round. So we've had a couple of articles earlier in the year speaking about LGBT inclusive hotels and spotlighting some amazing LGBT inclusive hotels. I had a piece that went out at the beginning of June for our travelers to share where you can attend the best Pride events in the world, either in person or virtually this year, because we're in that middle stage. And then later in the year, around August time, we're hoping to host a panel to speak to some trans and non-binary travelers about their experiences of traveling in those identities and what the travel industry and what we can all do to be better allies for trans and non-binary people as well. So bit of a spread out series of events, but definitely want to make it be something that's all year and not just a focus for June.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important, and it's great to hear that it's an all year round initiative. It's not just 1 out of 12 months and then it's put to the side till next year. And I love that 50-50 split between that education and celebration. But also I think what I particularly like is that as a business, there is that focus on how you can, improve your product and your services for this community.
100%.
Which is really great to see. And yeah, Tom and Adel would love to hear about what's happening at checkout.com.
Sure. I mean, firstly, Joe, I'd love to get on the mailing list for the community if any of those pieces are public, because it sounds like so many interesting topics. Yeah, we've got a lot. I mean, similarly, quite an internal focus, and we've been running events across the month. So we had a really great Paint with Pride session. I think it was the week before last, where we kind of got together on a virtual Zoom, had some Amazon vouchers for some drinks, had a toast, and created some virtual Pride art using various programs with very positive effects. I think some people were slightly embarrassed of their creations, but they were all really brilliant. We've got some great variety as well. So hopefully we'll be able to use those, whether it be kind of beaming them across the office. There's talk of creating various pieces of clothing if we can take part in London Pride later this year. So that was a great session. Obviously, you've got our wonderful panel today, and then we are having a big drag extravaganza, which is hosted by one of our colleagues next week. So there's surprise acts, there's games involved, there's all sorts of shenanigans. So that's going to be a very exciting finale next Wednesday. We also have a really fantastic and buzzing Slack channel, which is kind of the primary home for our Pride community. So we've been sharing a lot of kind of cultural recommendations, news, having conversations, on hot topics. So that's a really great buzz of activity, I think, where people can just kind of connect, converse, and communicate. And we've also been sharing volunteering opportunities as well. So our wonderful CSR lead has done some great work researching some amazing opportunities to get involved with, both virtually and in person across some of our global locations. And we've been sharing that with the community and encouraging them to get involved. So yeah, that's just a few of the things that's been going on within Checkout. Adel, anything I missed? No, all good.
I don't think so.
I can't believe I missed calling out Slack, because it wouldn't be Skyscanner if there wasn't also a Slack channel dedicated to Pride. So we definitely have one of those as well.
That's amazing. It sounds like there is a lot going on. I'm not sure how you're fitting it all into just 1 month. But just to, I guess, segue, adding on from, these Slack communities, I think that's a really important and a safe space. But I guess, as a global business, you have offices in different countries, you work with clients from all over the world. It can be quite different operating on a global scale where, local policies and laws can really vary very greatly. So I'd love to start perhaps with you, Tom. How do you tackle, I guess, the challenge of operating where, we're fortunate we live in the UK where, obviously there's still a lot of work to do, but it's very much advanced compared to a lot of other countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. It's an ongoing conversation at checkout as well, because this is certainly something that we are dealing with and wanting to try and tackle for people within our global network who aren't in a place like the UK where we have the rights that we do. So, I mean, I guess speaking specifically about our Pride community, historically, we've always had the Slack channel as closed. So it's kind of private, unsearchable. And I guess we had the perception that that was protecting the people within it in terms of their identities. But we actually, for the start of this Pride Month, have opened the channel for the very first time after quite a lot of kind of deliberation and discussion, in the hope that actually now that it is open, those that don't feel comfortable or secure in kind of actually joining and I guess declaring themselves in that way can still have access to all the amazing content and conversations and people within that community by looking in, so you don't actually have to join an open, going into the specifics of Slack now, you don't have to join an open channel to actually see everything that's going on within. So hopefully that is providing more support and visibility for members of the community. I think also acknowledging the kind of imbalance in rights that are existing across our network is something that we have really tried to do to make sure that people don't feel unseen or forgotten. So we definitely kind of called that out in our all company meeting back in May when we were talking about our Pride events. So yeah, just acknowledging, declaring, being available, I guess, on kind of a one-on-one basis for those confidential conversations and support if you feel comfortable doing so, or making sure that that kind of support is known, people know where to get it, basically, if you can't deliver it yourself. A few things that come to mind.
That's great. Yeah, I think the fact that you've opened that up. I think, a lot of the time when it comes to D&I, we're very focused on creating these safe spaces, which is very important. But I think, it's great that you've done that because, again, as you mentioned, there's people that might not feel comfortable openly joining a community like that.
Yeah, and I should say actually, so we've created, again, going into the specifics of Slack, we've created a new open community, but the previous closed private community still exists. So that is still a safe space where people can communicate and share more personal elements if they need to.
That's amazing. And Adel, we'd love to get your experience. You mentioned you worked in lots of different countries and different companies. We'd love to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think I try to take this more to the personal level where I want to talk about the community I come from and the work that I've been doing with my people. So back in Palestine, I co-founded together with a group of friends one of the biggest LGBTQIA plus organizations that exist in the Middle East, which is called Al-Qaws for sexual and gender diversity in the Palestinian society. Coming from a place where you can't be open, you can't be who you are, it is a taboo. There's a lot of issues that we face, and we wanted to create safe space for people to talk about who they are, meet people who are the same. Also, what we've done is we opened a support hotline for LGBTQIA plus people from the region, which is currently active in all the Middle Eastern countries, helping people have someone who is a professional sitting on the other side, a trained person, to listen and to guide them through whenever there is something they want to talk about. So this is kind of one of the things that we've been doing since 2002 and until today. There is also the place where you get in touch and you are in contact with people who have gone through horrific experiences, such as being thrown out of their houses, disowned by their families, and things like that. People who overnight became homeless because of who they are. So it is our place as people in the community that have kind of built our lives and are financially stable to help those people get through and stand on their feet. So this is some of the stuff that we do, and for someone who lived in Sweden and I lived in the Netherlands as well, one of the things that I used to help with is be a translator for asylum seekers on sexual basis. So for sexuality basis, sorry, where if there is a case that comes to the migration office and they need someone who actually understands the language and can explain the phrases and the terms, I would be volunteering to actually do that job in order to help those people get their lives sorted.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. You know, it's a completely different experience living in that region, which I think, you know, not many people can really appreciate. And, you know, perhaps after this, we can, you know, grab the name of the foundation you started, and, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call that would love to get involved and support and, you know, also there might be other similar organizations locally as well. But no, that's amazing. Yeah, Jenna.
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow with such an incredible. That sounds amazing. We definitely love the name of that organization as well, just on a personal level, and see if there's anything I can do to support there. I guess thinking from a Skyscanner perspective, we actually also do have that sort of 2 Slack channel model. So we've got a Slack channel space for anyone within the community. It's a private space. You kind of have to be added in to it by someone who already is already in it. So, you know, we make it known that there's that space if anyone wishes to. But I would say the majority, like 95% of our content and conversations and sessions are open to absolutely everybody in the organization, no matter what office you're in, where in the world you are, or whether you identify as LGBTQ+ or an ally, because that allies can, you know, as we say, it's people who are part of the community, or it might be someone who's closeted and doesn't want to come out but would like to attend under sort of the premise of being an ally. And so I think making sure that every resource and, you know, educational session, if we've got speakers coming in to talk about things, that it's accessible to absolutely everybody. And we always just try and vary the time of day that happens, because of course we're, you know, working with time zones as well. So, you know, whether it happens in the morning for us so that it's inclusive of our colleagues in APAC, or sometimes in the afternoon for our colleagues in America, and also always recording the session. So if someone doesn't want to attend in person, but they want to watch it back afterwards, that's absolutely fine as well. So just making all of our resources as available as possible. As I mentioned before, we've got like the ability to ask anonymous questions. So that's, again, creating that sort of safe space for someone to have a conversation if they're not ready to put their name to it. And I think just remembering that there are LGBTQ+ people everywhere in the world. I think Adel's done, you know, a fantastic point of, you know, sharing that already. But, you know, we shouldn't think that the initiatives and the things that we're organizing in our businesses, you know, oh, let's just do it for the UK because that's where we know we've got LGBT colleagues. There are LGBT people everywhere in the world. They might just not be as visible. And so I think the more we can do to make, you know, be mindful of local culture and local customs, but making it accessible to absolutely everybody is always been really important to us.
I completely agree. And I guess, you know, as we head into the last 10 minutes of the panel, again, if anyone in the audience has any questions, now's your chance. But I guess, yeah, as we let those trickle through, I guess, you know, for both of you, like Jenna and Tom, you know, you run the pride communities within your companies. I'd love to understand, perhaps starting with you, Jenna, you know, what prompted you to set up the LGBTQ staff network at Skyscanner? And I guess what's some advice you can give to people who are wanting to start their own?
Yeah, for me, it happened because before I came into Skyscanner, I knew that Skyscanner had an incredible culture. It was an inclusive space. It was a very friendly and open environment. And so when I joined 5.5 years ago, I was surprised that there wasn't already a Pride network, because the general culture in the organization was very inclusive. So it wasn't so much that there was, you know, a ton of work to be done. Just nobody had really thought like, oh, let's, you know, pull this together in a space. So I had actually asked the CEO in a roundtable that he was hosting about, you know, how can we be more inclusive? I was like, you know, this is me like 6 months into the job and my first ever corporate job. I was like, oh, I thought there would be a Pride network and there's not. And he was like, make one. And so that was like a moment of like, oh, okay, yep, sure. Well, like I have no idea what that means or like what I have to do. So, you know, a lot of Googling, and Stonewall UK is a fantastic resource that I've relied on a lot for sort of guidance on best practice, on how to establish a network. And really it was just about starting small, starting a Slack channel, which is, I think, is how everything happens these days, is, you know, creating that space, inviting people in, and then just starting with the absolute basics. I think you can like jump in wanting to do everything in a day because there's like a million ideas, but starting just with those conversations about sharing, what does the acronym LGBTQ+ stand for? What does it mean to be an ally? You know, and then establishing over a year or so a more formalized network to where we've now got a monthly newsletter that we send out to all of our network members, sharing sort of news from around the world and keeping them updated with things that we're doing in the business. Anyone who joins the network gets a lanyard. Our recent sort of all company update, when we all gathered together, we had pronoun pins. You know, we sent everyone a little postcard and left it on their desk that said, welcome to the network, like, thanks for being a supporter. So there's been so much that's happened over the last 5 years, but it's really grown slowly and over time as it's built momentum. And I think if we'd gone in 5 years ago trying to do all of that on day one, that would have not happened, because, you know, people would have been overwhelmed with the shock of like, whoa, there's so much to do here. So I think actually just that starting small and then, you know, building a core team of really strong and passionate allies or other people from within the community that you can work with to get that work done and to build up and spread the message has been sort of the way that I've done it, but I've never done it before. It seems to be working. So I think that's how you do it. That's how I did it anyway. Tom, I'll pass to you.
I mean, loads of great advice there. Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't set up the community, but have been helping run it for over a year now. And I think starting with a kind of purpose, I guess, and thinking about what you want to achieve long-term, I guess, or short-term within a community, the kind of benefits or expectations of members, and then actually publishing those, I think, is a great way of making sure that everybody knows what they're signing up for, I guess, or getting from the community. Asking for help as well is a big one. So we call them task forces within checkout. So getting people together who are up for taking on a bit more responsibility compared to just an average member of a community, and actually assigning roles within that group, I think has been hugely beneficial for us in sharing that load. You know, somebody might take the newsletter, for example, or events, or it can be a bit more blended than that. But yeah, definitely asking for those volunteers, I think, is a great shout as well. Seeking executive sponsorship or a kind of champion from leadership level, again, has worked really well for us. I think we shouldn't underestimate the power that those individuals can have, I think, in speaking up for their support, attending events, engaging with kind of conversations that are going on with our Slack channel. That's always brilliant, I think, bringing in those voices as well. So yeah, there are a few things that come to mind. And I would say don't overthink it. I think, as Jenna said, just starting with something will add massive value to those that are looking for this kind of resource within the business, and then growing from there. You don't have to have it all planned out and perfect when you hit that kind of green go button, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think that's the point of starting small. I think we all want to start communities and have these big events and we think about that end goal, but it all, not to sound cliche, but it all starts with that first step. But I guess, on that, we've got a question for you, Jenna. What's the most fun or memorable moment you had with the Pride Network at Skyscan?
Oh, interesting. So I think for me, it has to be last year during Pride Month. I guess Pride was cancelled in person. I will say Pride was not cancelled. Pride just looked different last year with, the pandemic. And so there was obviously that bit of panic of like, well, we can't all meet in the street and, rally together and have that celebration we usually have. So what's this going to look like? And actually it turned out to be the most phenomenal and exhausting day of my life, because we hosted a 5-hour webinar on LGBTQ+ travel, and I chaired 4 out of the 5 panels. And so for 4 hours straight, I spoke to different people from the LGBTQ+ community about travel. We spoke about the importance of representation and LGBT inclusive marketing in the travel industry. We spoke specifically about lesbian travel and some of the stereotypes, myths, and obstacles that lesbians face when traveling. Spoke to a couple of people in the LGBT travel community whose livelihood had been impacted by COVID and how they were pivoting. I could go on. I definitely had no voice by the end of it, but to see us go from, oh my goodness, Pride can't happen this year, to actually, you know, the company rallied and we pulled together the most phenomenal online event. And it reached so many more people than we would have if we'd gone out into the street. Because if we'd gone out in Edinburgh, we would have had a great day with our, 50 something staff members, and it would have been great. But by going online, we reached like over 20 countries, and over 300, 400 people joined in, and those recordings are still online for people to watch today. And so like seeing that global reach of every corner of the world and getting to speak to people from all over the world was just such a phenomenal day and a complete game changer for me. So, and LGBT and travel is where like both my passions combined. So that was like the best day for me, and it's such a great moment for us.
That's amazing. And I guess, final question, as we've got 5 minutes left. So I guess question for you, Adel, and just before that, we'll then wrap up, and I'll pass it to each of you. We'd love to get your final tips and any closing remarks. But I guess for you, Adel, how do you see the situation evolving for LGBTQ plus people in the Middle East?
I think that, looking back at since I was a teenager and looking at what's happening today, things are changing given the fact that, the internet is everywhere and people are having more visibility, and there's way more openness to talk about who you are. And the only part that is missing is actually the legalization of gay marriage, and also decriminalization of LGBTQ practices in certain countries. Fun fact is that most countries actually don't have a criminalizing law against it. It is more a cultural and society thing. So I think in the next few years, we will see that Generation Z, which is becoming now the generation that is leading, they will be kind of educating the older generation towards acceptance and openness. So that is kind of where I see things going. It's going to take time. It's been, for us, one of the things that I think that we talk about is growing up, coming out of the closet was not a Middle Eastern concept. It's a European concept, because for us, it was not an option. So now people I see more and more young people that I speak with, and they're more like, oh yeah, I just told my parents when I was 12 and it was okay. And it's kind of not a big deal. Whereas for us, it's like a planning phase and all that. So kind of seeing the world going also towards acceptance more and more. And I think that I would like to close with kind of, why it's important for me to have visibility. This is part of it, is the fact that, growing up, I was not able to show who I am. And now, being in senior management within Checkout, I am able to be who I am. I'm breaking the glass ceiling and kind of, smashing every single stereotype about, you're gay, you're not going to make it, you're not going to be, taken into senior positions and things like that. I have been always hearing as discouraging comments about who I am. And the thing is, if you look at, the high growth companies, and I'm going to take something which is more around, the diversity, and not only the community diversity here, but, the diverse ideas, the business imperative to it. When we talk about gender disparity in general, if we look at what these companies are, these are the most diverse companies, who are the companies with the highest success. And this is kind of coming from Joanna Littman, who wrote That's What She Said. If you're familiar with that, if you're not, I'm happy to share with you a link around that interview. But that is, for me, kind of my closing point around that.
No, amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that, Adel. And Jenna, let's get your closing thoughts and final tips for everyone on here today.
I'll jump. Yeah, I think for me, it would be don't be intimidated. So I guess like speaking to allies or whether you're someone that's looking to start a network, I think it can be a really scary and intimidating space to do something or get something wrong. But people can always perceive when you're coming from a place of great intention. And so when you are, scared to speak up because you don't want to say the wrong thing, I think when you speak up from a place of good intention and trying to be helpful and trying to learn, then that's all that we can ask of everyone, and to create those safe spaces where it's okay to say the wrong thing, as long as, it's in a learning, capacity, and we're all trying to do the right thing and build that inclusive environment. So don't stay silent for fear of doing the wrong thing. Just, try your best, try to learn as much as you can. And let's give each other a little bit of grace if people do make mistakes, because we're all human beings.
And Tom, to wrap us up.
Yeah, I mean, very, very similar to Jenna, actually, just remembering it's not a weakness to go and ask for guidance, seek support. I mean, I think I speak for all of us when I say would be comfortable with people reaching out and asking any questions or follow-up. So please do for me as well. And yeah, absolutely. Just don't feel like you have to go through the journey alone. It's a great, open and inclusive community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking an hour out of your day to listen to our amazing panelists. Again, I think as we've said, this isn't we're not just here for 1 hour. It's not just for the month of June. This is an ongoing conversation. So please connect with everyone here on LinkedIn. Let's keep the conversation going. I know there's been a few more questions, so definitely feel free to reach out to the panelists after the session as well. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.